Well, welcome everybody to Viking.TV. My name is William Thayer, and I have the pleasure of talking about one of the three voyages of exploration of Captain Cook. This is his second voyage. It's the first time that anybody deliberately went south in the direction of Antarctica. So it's pretty significant. Anybody else that went south only because they were trying to get around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa or Cape Horn in South America, but nobody deliberately went south. Cook would be the very first true Antarctic explorer. So a real pleasure to talk about that today. Now, my background is, actually I'm technical, I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer, aerodynamicist, and that actually has a lot to do with sailing. I also did a little bit of sailing with a few engineers because we were interested in the mechanics and aerodynamics of sailing. So I have some familiarity with sailing, and what Cook did is just absolutely fantastic. It's a great honor to talk about him. So let me show you the outline of today's talk. Next. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is Captain Cook's background. So I have 3 lectures on Captain Cook, one for each of his journeys. So I'm going to go back a little bit to the first lecture, give you a little bit of Captain Cook's background if you're not familiar with him, and then talk about the challenge that was really the reason for the second voyage, which is the exploration of the great Southern Ocean and to try to find land down there, why they expected to find quite a bit of land. There is land down there, but not as much as they expected to find. What were the dangers, some of the dangers of the voyage, because this was probably one of the greatest voyages ever because of the dangers involved, and Cook facing into those dangers and coming out successfully. And then his voyage was a 3-year voyage. So I'll talk about the first year. In the first year, he's going to be the first person to ever sail past the Antarctic Circle. The second year, he's going to go furthest south. That record will hold for about 50 years, and he'll have gone 15 degrees further south than anybody else. And for somebody to go 15 degrees further south than him, they're going to have to do that partly on land, and that'll be Shackleton. That'll be almost 150 years later. In the third year south, he's going to complete the circumnavigation of Antarctica without actually seeing Antarctica, but coming very close. And then finally, I'll end up with his Antarctic legacy. Next. So his book background. Next. So this is Captain Cook. This is one of the, I think, only portraits of him. And he was certainly an officer that the Royal Navy was extremely proud of. Next. Where he came from, if there's a map of England on the left and a map or a ship representing a collier on the right, these are coal ships. So if you look at that map of England, you look way up to the north on the, well, kind of the middle, I guess, of the eastern coast, you see Newcastle. And that was an area that was really rich in coal. And he came from a little bit south of that, Whitby. And from there, what they would do is they would bring the coal down the rivers, load it on the ships, take the ships down to London. That was the big market. So what you needed was ships that could take a lot of coal. So they had to be very strong ships. And they had to be sailed through the North Sea, which is all year long, which is really a rough sea. It's a rough sea with swells. It's a rough sea with winds. So you had to be really a good mariner to do that. And that's what Cook's background was. The colliers, the ships, the coal ships were strong, sturdy. They weren't fast, but they were strong and sturdy. So that was his background. What he did is he started out as the lowest level, sailor on the ship, just scrubbing the decks. And he worked his way up to mate, which is right below being the captain of the ship. He's responsible for setting all the sails, etc. And then this is a private company that's doing this under Captain Walker. And Captain Walker is about ready to make him captain of his own ship. But Cook was so enthralled with the Royal Navy that he said, what I want to do is spend the rest of my life in the Royal Navy. And so he volunteered to enter the Royal Navy. He was not aristocratic, So what he had to do is come in at the very lowest level of the Royal Navy, scrubbing the decks. But his talent was so obvious that pretty quickly, within 2 years, he was up to mate of a, which means essentially a captain of a smaller ship. Next slide. So where he first came to the attention of many of the people in the Royal Navy was in the conflict between the British and French for the control of Canada. So the penultimate battle was the British trying to take Quebec. So Quebec is shown here on the right with the French. And what the British did is they managed to land under the cliffs. The cliffs go on for miles. If you've ever been to the St. Lawrence River, they run along the St. Lawrence River. And at that time, they went straight down into water. Today, there's landfill down there. So it's not quite as dramatic as it used to be. But these cliffs are maybe 150, 200 feet high. And it was thought to be impossible to come up. There was one trail that went up, and the British managed to go up that trail. So what happened is a British captive from a prior war with the French managed to get to the British lines and said, hey, there's a secret path up these cliffs. It's a single file path. So it'd be pretty easy for the French to stop them. So what the British did is they landed in the middle of the night. They got their troops up there. They got enough troops up in the plains of Abraham. The French then discovered them early in the morning at first light, came out with their troops. There was a violent battle. In about 15 minutes, it was pretty much all over. The French army was broken. The trick was, how do you get your troops landed over at that point where the British are? Next chart. So the star is where they want to land. And the British were all along the southern bank. So the logical thing, they were going to get over there two ways. Longboats, they would row their way over, and then later they would come in with larger ships and offload maybe more troops and more supplies. So if you start, if you've ever been up there, St. Lawrence, it's got a vigorous current. So if you started directly opposite that star and rowed across, you wouldn't end up at the star. You'd go where that dotted line is. You'd probably be about a mile down the northern coast. So the trick was, what's the current and what's the depth of the river there? And that's what Cook did. He took his ship in. He was in charge of it. It was a smaller ship. And he took soundings to get the depth. But more importantly, he measured the current. Therefore, the British could start at the appropriate spot further up the coast to the left and end up at the star, which is what their goal would be. Okay, next chart. So they started further up the coast. They rowed across, perpendicular to the other shore, but the current carried them down, but it carried them down right to where the star was. They were able to do this relatively quietly so that the French didn't realize that they were coming up. There were a couple guards right at the top of this trail, but they sent up their special forces, overwhelmed them, and then all the troops were able to go up the single file path. Next chart. So that enabled the British to get enough troops up there in the plains of Abraham, and they were able to defeat the French, and therefore they took Canada. That was the penultimate battle. So next chart. So after that battle, the British are now in control of Canada, and they go, okay, now we control the St. Lawrence River, we control Quebec, but we need a good map for all of our ships that are coming over here, because some of the ships that were coming over would, it's uncharted territory, and they would run aground or they'd have problems. So they needed a good map to figure out where they were on the coast, and also they needed a good hydrographer map of what were the depths and probably also kind of where the currents were on this. So that's what Captain Cook did first. He was recognized as being a very good surveyor and hydrographer, and so he made this map of the St. Lawrence River. You can kind of look at it on the left, and it says James Cook down there where I have the orange arrow. After he did that, they said, okay, as part of this agreement with the French to end the war, they got some fishing rights off Newfoundland, but they were constricted to certain parts of the coast, but nobody knew what Newfoundland looked like. So they had to have somebody map Newfoundland. That's at the right here. And this is what Cook did over a period of 4 years. So he was very meticulous, a very good surveyor, a very good navigator, And next chart. I just want to give you some idea of what the amount of work was involved. You can see this coast of Newfoundland. It is extremely intricate. He's got to do all this using surveying methods. It took him 4 years because you can only really operate about 6 months a year, and then the winter takes over and it's terrible weather. So he did this, so very persistent, very precise work. This is just what you want for an explorer. So the Royal Navy realized this, and when there was going to be a transit of Venus, they said, the man we want in charge of this is Captain Cook. Next chart. This is just to show you that there's surveying involved. So Cook would do a vast amount of surveying on his first voyage, which was to map all of New Zealand and all of the east coast of Australia. Not much on the second voyage, which we're going to talk about, because he didn't discover much new land. And then on the third voyage, the Canadian and Alaskan coast, and also the coast of Siberia. And what you do is it's geometric work with surveying. It's distance and angles. Okay, next chart. So what was the motivation behind the second voyage? It's the first voyage down into the Southern Ocean. After his first voyage of exploration, he came back. Now, the Dutch had bumped into Alaska before. Tasman had bumped into Tasmania, he bumped into New Zealand, but nobody really knew the extent of those lands. But when Cook came back with the surveying that he did and the mapping that he did of those two areas after his first voyage, they went, oh, big landmass of Australia. This is an entirely new piece of knowledge. And the question was, could there be more such Australia landmasses out there if you sailed a little further south? So that was the whole objective of this. Okay, next chart. So what was unknown? Basically, what was unknown is in that light, sort of that dark circle around Antarctica. Nobody knew that Antarctica existed. Okay, nobody had sailed down into that dark region, which is about 50 degrees south latitude. In fact, not too many people went below 40 degrees. The only people that would be going below 40 degrees would be involved in South America, okay, going around Cape Horn, going to the southern parts of Argentina, Patagonia, and maybe to Chile. So in one time, on a voyage from Valparaiso to Buenos Aires in 1675, a Spanish ship carrying an English gentleman was blown off course. That's why I show that green ellipse, because he went over to South Georgia Island. And they weren't in the exploration business. They were just trying to get to Buenos Aires. So they hid behind the lee side of the island to avoid the storm. When the storm finally petered out after a couple of weeks, they sailed on to Buenos Aires. But somebody knew there was some land down there. It wasn't marked very well latitude and longitude wise, but that's why I show. But basically, this area was all unknown, and probably a little bit to the north of that. So could there be big land masses the size of Australia down there? Yes, absolutely. Furthermore, people hadn't gone across all of the South Indian Ocean or the South Pacific Ocean. Next chart. So the theory was, and there's nobody knew. Okay, so I mean, we laugh at it today, but the theory was that the Earth, they knew all the land masses in the northern hemisphere, and there were a lot more landmass area than Africa or South America, and now Australia that was added in the southern hemisphere. So the theory was that the Earth would wobble if it wasn't balanced with the equal amount of landmass in the southern hemisphere. So different geographers came up with imaginative ways of putting an equal amount of landmass in the southern hemisphere. And of course, nobody had sailed down there, very few below 40 degrees south latitude, hardly anybody below 50 degrees south latitude. So there was a lot of room down there for a landmass. So this is just one estimate by a geographer of what the landmass looked in the southern hemisphere. Next chart. And this is just the same thing again, a different geographer showing the big land masses they expected down there so that the land mass in the northern hemisphere would equal the land mass in the southern hemisphere. In fact, today we know that it's 2/3 of the land masses in the northern hemisphere and only 1/3 in the southern hemisphere. It is not symmetrical. But I have a line there, the green line of 50 degrees south, and I say basically nobody sailed south of that. The only point where people would sail further south of that was to get around Cape Horn. Okay, and that's that red dot just to the lower left of the 50 degrees south designation that I have there. Next chart. So what I'm talking about is things like this. This is the red line is the path of his very first voyage. This was to do a transit of Venus. That's the upper part in the South Pacific, and then he went down. He was given instructions to go find out what these Dutch have bumped into, and he mapped all of New Zealand and all of Australia. But you could see that, you know, down there below 50 degrees and a lot below 40 degrees, because many people hadn't gone down that far, like those two dark ellipses I have, there could be big land masses the size of Australia or perhaps even larger. And Antarctica is fairly good size, but it's even down further south than what I'm showing. Next chart. So further south, who had gone further south? Nobody deliberately went further south. They went further south because they had to. Okay, so in the late 1400s, it's Vasco da Gama going around the Cape of Good Hope, really headed for India. He's not trying to head further south. He's trying to go around India, but he got 34 degrees south. Okay, and then Magellan going around in the first circumnavigation of the world. He didn't make it the entire way around, but his expedition did. He's going to go down and he's going to discover the Magellan Straits, and he's going to get through from the Atlantic to the Pacific for the first time. And that's 54 degrees south. Now, Cape Horn's a little further south of that. That's about 56 degrees south. So the record will be held prior to Cook, will be held by Sir Francis Drake, who is going to circumnavigate the world for the first time for the British. And he's going to go down, he's going to go through the Straits of Magellan, but when it comes out to the Pacific, he's going to get hit by a storm from the north. And when you get hit by a storm, you don't fight it, you just let the storm push you. And what he did is he let the storm push his ship south. And as he went south, he wanted to keep the coast in sight, you know, just in case the ship started to sink, at least they'd have a chance to get ashore. So he kept going south from the Straits of Magellan, and that's about 2 degrees of south. And then finally he got down to Cape Horn, and he was just in nothing but ocean. So that's why the area between the Cape Horn and the Antarctic Peninsula is called Drake Strait. That is because Sir Francis Drake discovered there was no land south of Cape Horn, at least in the area that he was. So he's 56 degrees south. Next chart. So Cook, what he is going to do in his 3 years of voyage, the furthest south he's going to go is 71.2 degrees south, which is just a tremendous jump further south than anybody else. So he's going to go 15 degrees further south than Drake. And to go 15 degrees further south than that would be 86 degrees. Actually, nobody will go right to 86 degrees. The person that will go past 86 degrees will be Shackleton when he almost makes it to the South Pole at 88 degrees south. But this is going to be almost 150 years later. So just to give you some idea of the magnitude of Cook's accomplishment. Furthermore, again, I emphasize nobody deliberately went south because the weather was so terrible. Cook deliberately went south, and he showed that you could go south and you could survive, and then that led for other explorers to go south, but not for probably another 50 years. Next chart. So the expedition, the second expedition is going to be a little bit different than his first expedition. The first expedition was just one ship. It was a collier renamed as the Endeavour. And so for the second expedition, the Royal Navy upped the equipment. The Resolution was another collier, but it was bigger by about 100 tons. And it would be accompanied by a second collier renamed the Adventure. This would be captained by Captain Furneaux, who was an accomplished mariner also. The expedition is going to be mostly to the south, but you just can't, that's during the summer season of the south. But during the winter, they would go to the north, and they would go as far north as Tahiti every year, but they would come back, and their launching place to go south again would be Queen Charlotte Sound in New Zealand. Next chart. So what are some of the dangers? This is just some of the dangers. High wind speeds, that's one of the dangers. And in fact, Cook is going to have his top sail ripped off. That's going to be one of the things that makes him less able to do a southern sweep on his third year of exploration. Collision with reefs. He did have a collision with a reef on his first voyage. That was Great Barrier Reef of Australia. He was 12 miles offshore, and he managed to get the ship off the reef and into the shore, fixed it up, took it to Java. The Dutch really did the job, and he got back home. But uncharted waters, it could be reefs, it could be just shallow water, it could be a rocky mount that comes up from the bottom of the sea. You could just run into that. And when he's going south, he's not going to be 12 miles offshore any land. He is going to be thousands of miles away from anywhere. So if you punch a hole in the side of your ship, you're pretty much doomed. That can also happen from icebergs, and he's going to encounter a lot of icebergs. There's another danger with ice, and that's the freezing ice field. So you've got ice that's formed by different means. You can have ice fields that could be an iceberg breaking up, or it could just be frozen salt water. And it will vary very much depending upon what the temperature is. So you could make your way through an ice field on one day, and if the temperature dropped that night, you could be frozen in, and maybe frozen in for the next year, like what happened to Shackleton. Having no visibility is a real problem. Picture that I took down near Elephant Island of this just gray fog that just comes in and is absolutely impenetrable. You really can't see anything through it, and it can drop really fast to water level, which means you've got no visibility seeing if there's an iceberg there, if there's shallow water, anything. It's really having no visibility is a real problem. Scurvy. He's going to be going down. He's going to be leaving Queen Charlotte Sound. He's going to go down south for like 3 months. And when you're at sea that long, what would happen to the sailors that were at sea that long is they would get scurvy. So this is the very first sign, is your teeth get loose and gums of your mouth. But what the real problem is a general overall weakness of your body, and it frequently resulted in death for these people that were doing long voyages, particularly across the Pacific. Across the Atlantic was probably a month. You wouldn't really have that problem. But across the Pacific, you might be going for 3 months, and scurvy would really hit a lot of ships. They didn't realize that the problem was vitamin C. That vitamin C wouldn't be discovered until 1931, so about 200 years later. Okay, next chart. So the winds down there, to the mariners, if you get below 40 degrees south latitude, it's called the roaring 40s. If you go below 50 degrees south latitude, it's called the screaming 50s. You're getting the idea that the wind speed's going up. And if you go below 60 degrees, it's the shrieking 60s. So the wind is really, really powerful. A calm day, a typical wind speed would be 20 to 30 miles an hour. But if you got a gale, you'd be right up to 50 miles an hour in no time at all. So I've been down to Cape Horn twice. Once, Captain Knutson got us down there in a perfect 6-hour period of calm weather. There was no winds and no swells at Cape Horn. Previously, I had been down there. It was 50 miles an hour, absolutely bitterly cold, and big swells of 30 to 40 feet. So it just depends. Okay, next chart. So my nephew is a meteorologist at University of Wisconsin, and so I asked, hey, what are the winds like down in Antarctica? And he said, well, the winds, because there is no land obstruction, just circle the continent of Antarctica. And so if you're looking at it from space, you're looking down from space as this view is, the winds are constantly going around clockwise. So it's not like the winds change direction very much. It's pretty constantly going around clockwise, and the currents as well. Okay, so it's easy to go one direction. It's hard to go back the other direction. So since the winds are going out of the west, it's easy to go east. Cook knew that. So he would go down to South Africa. He would go deliberately south, straight to Antarctica. Then he would go as far south as he went, and he would basically sail with the winds going around, and he would end up his first year coming up out of the real southern regions where it says Antarctic convergence. Okay, that's the convergence of the two oceans down there. I'm not going to go into that, but he would come up to New Zealand. Okay, that's what Cook will do. So he got kind of halfway around the world the very first year of voyage. And then he's going to go around the second year. He's going to go from New Zealand down to where it says Ross Sea, and then he's going to come back up. And the third year he'll go around over there where it says South America. But he'll always have the winds behind him. But you don't always have the luxury of going clockwise. Sometimes when you hit an ice field or something, you got to turn around, you got to go the other way. I'll talk about that later. But wind, the speeds are really quite high. Thank you. Next chart. Okay, so uncharted waters, you could have a rocky promontory come right up from the bottom and your ship could sail right into it. Nobody knew how deep the waters were. Fortunately, the waters are fairly deep around Antarctica, but you could just hit a rock right out in the middle of nowhere. Well, if you did hit a rock right out in the middle of nowhere, you're 3,000 miles from anywhere. So there is no help. You're not close to Australia. Shackleton did have a problem getting frozen in the ice, but he was able to get help because he knew where South Georgia was. That's where he started from. There was a whaling station there, and so he could go to South Georgia and get help. It was a pretty epic journey to go do that. But if Cook did the same thing and ended up in South Georgia, there was no help there, so it wouldn't have worked. Next chart. The Rocky Mountains coming up from the bottom, or reefs, could be a danger, but icebergs could be a danger. Now, Cook was familiar with icebergs because that's one of the things that limited his exploration around Newfoundland. So the icebergs come down from Greenland and they come right by Newfoundland and out in the sea to the east of Newfoundland. One of those icebergs, of course, was fatal to the Titanic. But icebergs, you have to remember, icebergs, 90% of the iceberg is below the water. So you're seeing only 10% of the iceberg when you're looking at an iceberg above the water. And that means it can extend underwater. It's very, very strong and has sharp edges, as the Titanic discovered to its, fatal results. But with Cook and the Resolution and Adventure, they could sail right into the edge of an iceberg, even though they were, still far away from the part that they could see above water. They were well aware of this danger, so they would be out there at the front of the ship and maybe being led by smaller ships, sounding by throwing down lead weights to see if there was any obstruction down there. Next chart. So this is a very, very small iceberg. This is on one cruise I did to Antarctica. And so the seal has his own little iceberg to himself, very private. But what I wanted to show on this is the sharp edge underneath the water. Now here it's pretty easy to see that, okay? But this is a very clear day. So you can imagine a large iceberg with sharp edges like this sticking out under misty or foggy conditions. You can kind of see the danger that the Resolution and Adventure were taking every day they were down there. Next chart. So they had some artists on board, and so this is a painting of one of the artists. So it shows Resolution and Adventure sailing down among the icebergs. So the very first year that they sailed down, which was the only year that they were both together, they will get separated in the fog. I'll talk about that later. But they were sailing down in these icebergs. Well, the icebergs, the sails, the masts of these ships are pretty tall. The icebergs were taller than that. So these were just absolutely enormous icebergs. And then, of course, there's blocks of ice in between there. There's under the surface of the water are iceberg edges, which could really fatally damage these ships. You see small ships out from the big ships. They were real careful. When you got close to an iceberg, you would probably a good idea would be to send each ship had 3 smaller ships. You'd send out a longboat or a yawl or something like that to take soundings around before you sail through. Now, the good thing is icebergs don't move real fast, so you just have to be careful around them. Next chart. So this shows an iceberg in the background and an ice field in the foreground. So I'm going to talk about ice field. So next chart. This is the ice field. Now, if you look at this ice field, depending upon the size and the width of the ice field, and if you could see on the other side of the ice field, if you could see clear water, you might decide to try to go through this ice field, or just to say, hey, this is as far as I can go, try to go around the ice field. And that's what Cook did for the most part. He tried to go around ice fields, but sometimes they would stretch for 100 miles in each direction. So the danger with the ice fields is that while you might be able to thread your way through it, and these were pretty stout ships, thread your way through the ice field, if the temperature dropped, you could get frozen in the ice field. Next chart. So here's a modern ship and showing an ice field, and you can see the clear water on the other side. So there's, depending upon how thick the ice field was, you might make the decision to try to go through a relatively thin ice field and get to the clear water on the other side. You always got to worry about, if I get to the other side, I've also got to get my way back out to the north. So it's a real question of judgment, and Cook's judgment was very good. So when Shackleton went south, of course, he went into an ice field. He tried to go as far south as he could, because he was going to get off with sleds and then transit all of the Antarctic Peninsula. And the further south he went, the better his food supply would last for the entire trip. So he didn't want to get off way far north. He wanted to get off way far south. So he was tempted to go further and further south. Next chart. So Shackleton went further south. He got in an ice field. It froze. It unfroze the next day. He thought he could go further south. They went further south. It froze, and it never unfroze. So he got frozen in the ice for about a year. Initially, it's just the relatively shallow ice around is a very strong ship, so it didn't affect him. But the ice fields move, and there's icebergs in there, and the dynamics of these ice fields is really quite complex, and eventually it got to where it crushed his ship. Next chart. So this is the Endurance, his ship getting crushed by ice, and eventually be crushed and go below the surface. Try to get everything off, of course. But if this happened to Cook, he had no chance like Shackleton. Shackleton could make it across and make it to somewhere where there was help and civilization, which turned out to be South Georgia Island. Next chart. This is visibility. This is Antarctic fog. So on this particular cruise that was into Antarctica, we went to Elephant Island. So when Shackleton's men were on the ice, they got turned around to the north. They tried to go to the west, but remember, the winds go to the west, comes from the west. So he really had to go, the best he could do was kind of go north. He went to Elephant Island, and then from there, the only place that he could get help was to go to the east, that was South Georgia. So where his men, he left most of the men here on Elephant Island, it's down to the left, probably about a mile. And I was out on deck. It was pretty darn cold and windy. And I took a picture of this glacier, and I'm about to turn around, and the ship was a little bit in the way, but it was turning down, so we were going to go by where Shackleton's men were. By the time I had turned around, just in less than a minute, this fog, this Antarctic fog, just went right down to the surface of the water and stayed there for the rest of the day. So I couldn't even get a picture where Shackleton's men were. That's how fast this fog can just drop. And you can see that fog, if you look at the top of this picture, absolutely impenetrable. So when that fog dropped on this particular voyage that I was on, when I went back inside, like essentially the World Cafe, and looked out, I could barely see the rail of the ship on the outside. I could see it, but barely. Okay, so you're looking probably about 10 feet visibility. Next chart. Scurvy. Scurvy is going to be another problem that they always faced on voyages, let's say at least over 1 month in length. And they didn't know what was causing it. They had certain characteristics that they would recognize at the start, but then there would be just a general attack on the health of the body. And they didn't know how to treat it, of course, and so they would end up losing a lot of crew members every time. So what it was vitamin C. So like Magellan lost a lot of people when he went across the Pacific 3-month trip, but Magellan was okay and his officers were okay. What they didn't realize, they had a little better food. They brought their own personal food, which included jams, and the jams had some vitamin C in it. That's why Magellan and his officers came out okay, but the sailors frequently did not. Well, the worst case was Captain Anson. So this is in 1740. And he left with 6 British ships, about 1,800, a little more than 1,800 crew to go around the world. When he finally returned to England, he had 188 sailors left. Most of them had succumbed to scurvy. Not all of them, but most of them had succumbed to scurvy. So this, if you ever want to dramatize just how bad scurvy was, Captain Anson's voyage and expedition is the classic case. What Cook did is he knew that this was a problem, and he knew it was a problem on his first trip. So what he did, what he found, there was a couple of things that worked. The Indians in Canada knew what the solution was, and they had spruce beer. Well, that's not something that you can get easily in the Pacific, but greens worked as well. And so Cook knew this, so he used that, and he told his crew to eat greens, and also had them eat sauerkraut. And they didn't want to eat sauerkraut, so he was kind of clever on that. He said, okay, well, just the officers can eat sauerkraut. Then everybody wanted to eat sauerkraut. So he, in a very subtle manner, managed to get his crew to eat sauerkraut. So he never lost anybody to scurvy. Captain Furneaux was not as vigorous in enforcing eating greens and eating sauerkraut, so he did lose some of his crew the first year to scurvy. But scurvy was definitely a problem. Next chart. So the first year, next chart. So what Cook is going to do is he's going to go down to Cape Town. He's going to leave Cape Town, and he's going to just head south. Now, on these ships, they always took animals, probably sheep and goats and chickens, and they had them in crates or cages on the deck. They'd use them, the chickens to lay eggs and stuff like that. Well, as he goes south, all the animals freeze and die. It's much colder going south than what he experienced going north. For example, by the time they got down to 55 degrees, all the animals were dead, 55 degrees south. Well, in the summertime, at 55 degrees south, that's 55 degrees north latitude is Edinburgh. I mean, your chickens and your sheep and your goats aren't going to die in Edinburgh during the summer. So it was quite shocking to Cook and Furneaux that as they went south at 55 degrees, it was terribly cold. And going to south to Antarctica is a lot colder than going north at the same latitude. Now, the big thing in going north in the areas like Edinburgh and Svalbard and something like that is the Gulf Stream, of course, goes north between Norway and Greenland all the way up there. It's really more towards the Norwegian side, is the Gulf Stream, and that's what warms everything up. Okay, well, there was no Gulf Stream down in Antarctica. Okay, that current just goes around clockwise forever. There's no input from a warmer area. So he's going to stay 50 to 60 degrees south and sometimes below 60 degrees south, searching for large land masses. Remember, roaring 40s, screaming 50s. He's in the screaming 50s and the shrieking 60s as far as wind is concerned. Next chart. So this is, again, the red is the first year, the first voyage that he did. The Dutch were settling in what was the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia today, and they had a way of sailing. They took advantage when they came down to Cape Town to get to Java, which was where their headquarters were. They would sail, as the orange arrow shows, east from Cape Town, but this is at about 35 degrees south latitude or something like that, and they would go across. They didn't always determine their longitude very well. And so they bumped into the west coast of Australia. It was very deserty. They didn't think it was worth anything, so they just noted it, but sailed north to Java. So that's the yellow thing. What he's going to do is just tremendously further south than the Dutch ever sailed. Okay, so he's going down to Antarctica. He's going to try to get go as far south as he can go, and he's going to go along that coast. So if you look, it's not the greatest chart to show this, but if you look at Antarctica on there, starting from the left, you'll see that is the furthest north, or the least southern latitude. And as you go to the right towards South America, the coast drops away and is even further south. Okay, so he was going along the further northern coast, and he would have just discovered Antarctica if the ice that had formed on the shore hadn't been out there about 75 miles. So it shows the course of Cook going along that coast and then coming up to New Zealand. Next chart. So he'll go further south. He'll go to 67.2 degrees, which is a tremendous achievement. So this is going to be past the Antarctic Circle. Okay, the Antarctic Circle is 66 degrees south. What makes the reason you have the Antarctic Circle is anything that's further south than that, at the Antarctic Circle, you have at least one day that's 24-hour days sunshine and one night that's 24 hours of darkness. That's the significance of the Antarctic Circle. Same thing for the Arctic Circle. And then as you go further south of that, you'll have longer days. Okay, he went a little bit further south of that, but the first time any human had gone further south in the Antarctic Circle. He will get to within 75 miles of Antarctica, and he'll be blocked by solid ice. That's the reason he couldn't get there. So they'll get down there, and they're going to get hit with this fog. Remember my picture of the fog at Elephant Island? It will go right down to 0, and they anticipated this problem, and so what they were going to do is try to stay close to each other by firing a cannon. It's obviously not firing cannonballs, but firing the powder so that they could hear each other. But when it's 0 visibility, you go, where did that sound come from? I think it came from over there. Okay, maybe it came from the right side, maybe it came from the left side. And pretty soon, after 3 days, they just got separated and never found each other again. So they realized their next rendezvous is going to be Queen Charlotte Sound. Next chart. So what he did is, roughly, coming down to Antarctica is the purple arrows coming from the upper right down to the bottom. They're going to get very close, 67.2 degrees south, very close to Antarctica, but not quite there because the ice had built out from the shore. He was capable of going further south. He would go 71 degrees south as record. So he would have been able to discover Antarctica had there not been ice. But they get separated, and they're going to go different paths going north. Furneaux is going to go up. In the first place that he's going to land is going to be Tasmania and Hobart Harbor, which is an excellent harbor. If you ever get a chance, go to Tasmania. This Hobart is just a beautiful place and really long harbor. Where we went by, Hobart City is up at the end, but he anchored a little bit before you get there. Everybody knows where it is. And then what Cook did is he came up to the southern part of New Zealand to Dusky Sound. There's 3 sounds, Milford Sound, and Dusky Sound is one of the 3 sounds down there. At least 3 sounds. And what they did is they came out of this just freezing weather where the ropes were freezing, the sails were freezing, the wind is like 50 miles an hour, the wind chill factor, God knows how cold it was. And everybody is just beat up. The sails are beat up, the rigging's beat up, the ships are beat up, the men are beat up, and they just want to get to shore, anchor in some place where they're not in rough water, and they can just recuperate before they go back to Queen Charlotte Sound. So they ended up in 2 spots there. Next chart. Now, the reason that Cook didn't discover Antarctica on this first year of voyage is that he wasn't sailing in 2016. If you look at the right chart, there's a NOAA chart showing the ice buildup on Antarctica, the minimum ice. And you see there's just a little ice offshore. So Cook definitely, in my opinion, would have discovered Antarctica had there not been ice out there. If you look at the chart on the left, it shows the maximum ice. This was for 2015. Now he's sailing in 1773. So it was colder back then, so there was more ice. I mean, we don't have any pictures of it, but there was more ice then, so it would probably be out further than that. But between the right and the left picture, the ice was out 75 miles. Otherwise, he would have discovered Antarctica. So he did really the best that anybody could have done in 1773. Next chart. So they come up to Queen Charlotte Sound. Now, there's North Island and South Island in New Zealand. The Cook Strait goes between there. And on the southern part, South Island, I guess you'd say the north part of the South Island, are these beautiful sounds and inlets and islands. And it's very protected from any swells of the ocean. It's just like glass lake. And the mountains are beautiful. You've got pine trees to tropical growth there. It's just idyllic. And so this is what he found on his first voyage. And every voyage that he made, he went back to Queen Charlotte Sound. And I didn't know who Queen Charlotte was. Well, Queen Charlotte was the wife of King George III. So there's a picture of Queen Charlotte too. Next chart. So he's going to meet Furneaux and Adventure at Queen Charlotte Sound. This is after they've both taken a couple of weeks to rest up at their first landfall. From there, from Queen Charlotte Sound, once they made the rendezvous, he's going to go up to Tahiti. He had very good relations with all the people at Tahiti. This is going back to the days of the transit of Venus. And so he always, on every one of his voyages, went to Tahiti. And let me tell you, the sailors were happy going to Tahiti, beautiful women, et cetera, et cetera. So they go up to Tahiti, and of course they get all stock up on all coconuts and tropical fruit and everything, and rest up, and everybody's feeling real good. And then they're going to head south again from Tahiti to Queen Charlotte, and that's going to be their jumping off point to go south alone for the second year, the southern exploration. Well, what happens is, as they're sailing from Tahiti down to New Zealand, there's rough seas and weather down there, and they get hit with a gale storm at least 50 miles an hour, and it damages the rigging of the Adventure. Cook manages to get into a protected bay in North Island, but Furneaux doesn't. He just gets beat up by the storm and blown way away from New Zealand. Finally, the storm abates. He's able to get back to New Zealand, but to the North Island. And there he works on fixing up his rigging, repairing his ship. Cook, meanwhile, has sailed down to Queen Charlotte Sound, and he's stocking his ship up with water and everything. He's getting ready to go south. He's waiting for Furneaux to come down, and he waits as long as he can. He's got a certain amount of time that is the Antarctic summer where he can go south, and he just makes the judgment call. Well, Furneaux is had some damage. He's going to come down too late, and he leaves him a note. Furneaux will find the note later on, but Furneaux will arrive 5 days after Cook has left. So they're going to be sailing separately. Now, Furneaux knows what Cook is going to do, and so he's planning initially to sail down south like Cook. But an unfortunate incident is going to happen. They have three small boats, one with a sail on the ship, so you can go down the coast 5 miles pretty easily with the sail on the small ship. And he sends 11 members of his crew down to get more greens around in another cove. And they go ashore, and they're waiting for these crew members to come back. They don't come back. So he sends down another ship, and they find the small boat, but they don't find the members of the crew until they find the bones. And what has happened is the Maoris have jumped the 11 crew members, overwhelmed them, killed them all, and eaten them. And this is kind of what the Maoris would do. The Maoris had many different tribes, and they would constantly be fighting each other. And when they would kill their enemies, they would eat their enemies. So this was a standard operational procedure for the Maoris. But what this is a real blow to Furneaux, because now he's got 11 members less of his crew. you really need everybody that you know is in your crew to handle the rough weather in the south. Plus, everybody's pretty discouraged that 11 members of the crew have been killed. So what he's deciding is that since Cook is going to go pretty far south, like 60 degrees south, he'll go about down in between 50 and 60, closer to 50 degrees, just head for Cape Horn and then over to Cape of Good Hope and then home. Next chart. Second year. Okay, so Cook is going to be sailing alone. Next chart. So what he's going to do, I showed the star at Tahiti because that's his furthest north point, but he's going to come down to Queen Charlotte Sound. He's going to wait for no, and then he's going to sail south again. So the first year he swept out all that southern distance between the Cape of Good Hope and New Zealand. Now he's going to sweep out the southern part of the Pacific down there between 50 and 60 degrees. And in fact, in one dramatic sailing thrust, he will go down to 71.2 degrees south, which is a tremendously far south record. Next chart. Okay, so what he's doing the second year is the green arrows here on the lower left. He's going to be down in, and maybe I didn't give him justice for sweeping out a lot of the area on the south. What I did want to emphasize that in one, he will sweep out a lot of the area to the south. He'll come north just because everybody's frozen, get them unthawed, you know, in 50-degree weather, and then he's going to head south one more time. And it's not going to be to sweep out the region. It is just going to be how far south can I go? So he goes, the blue arrow, he goes as far south as he can, which is 71.2 degrees south. The top gallant, that's the top, he's got 3 masts. I'll show you a picture of the Endeavor that gets blown off, okay? And he just can't go further south anymore. And finally, he turns around at 71.2 degrees south. Now, one of his midshipmen on board wants to be the furthest south person, so he climbs out that mast that goes forward from the bow of the ship, the bowsprit, and that is James Vancouver. Just a young man at the time, and he climbs way out and he goes, waves his hat and say, I am the man that's gone furthest south. And then Cook turns the ship around and goes back north. But it was as far south as you could go, and then everybody was real happy when he turned around and started going north. But that set a record. Next chart. So one of the things that was a problem both for Furneaux and Cook was fresh water. You're going out for 3 months. Your water that you stocked up in Queen Charlotte Sound can go bad. So you're looking for, you know, always water supply. So when Magellan is sailing across the Pacific, he's happy to get Guam because he can get some fresh water. You're always looking for fresh water out there in the Pacific. Well, there was no land that they bumped into the first year or the second year, but there's these icebergs. And so nobody really knew too much about how icebergs were formed. They knew they existed, but where the heck did they come from? And so Cook goes out and he goes, well, I wonder if it's fresh water. So he sent out his small ships as shown here, like a whaleboat or a longboat, and they went out with picks and they would chop up some of the ice. This is obviously a small iceberg here. To the left that they're chopping, and they would get these chunks of ice, put it in a barrel, let it melt, and by God, it was good, clean water. So with plenty of icebergs around, Cook had an adequate supply of water. Now, it turns out the icebergs come from land. They come from the snowfall. It's compressed down. It comes out in the form of glacier, and when it gets to the water, it breaks off and it forms icebergs. Also, ice can form by freezing salt water. And that was a matter of some controversy, and they didn't know whether the salt water could freeze at the time. But regular water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Salt water is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. When it freezes with sufficient time, let's say that the surface ice is 1 foot thick, it will actually, the salts will not freeze and they will sink to the bottom of that ice. So you can scrape off the top part of that ice and you can get fresh water from frozen salt water. That does take a little bit of time. And then eventually what happens is salt goes down to the bottom. So if you were a seal and you were underneath one of these ice floes and you bit off some of the ice down there, that would be very saline ice. Okay, you wouldn't want that. Next chart. So he's got to worry about icebergs and ice fields, and maneuvering in these areas is tricky. So anybody that's yachtsman knows how to do this, but I'm assuming that some people haven't sailed. So I'm just going to say sailing with the wind at your back, that's pretty easy. And for the most part, they were sailing from using the wind that was coming from the west and sailing east. But sometimes they had to go around the other way because they'd be getting trapped by an ice field, or they had to get out of the way of icebergs or something like that. So sailing into the wind requires tacking. And sometimes you got to turn around real quick. That's tricky. So next chart. So tacking, I'm just going to really concentrate on the left chart. You can do it as the right chart shows as well. But tacking, the wind is coming from the upper part of the chart and going directly down to the southern part. You cannot sail directly into the wind. But if you're very good, you can sail at about a 45-degree angle. And if you're not quite as good, or your ship is not quite as good, it may be at a 30-degree angle. And so what you do is you end up tacking. This is called tacking. You'll go 45 degrees to the right, 45 degrees to the left, and 45 degrees to the right. And eventually you'll get downwind, which is where you want to go. But it will take you a longer way to get there with this zigzag course. And again, there's other ways of turning the ship around in the wind, but I'm not going to concentrate on that. One thing that you have to do is you have to change the sails from one side of the ship to the other side of the ship. It's the aerodynamics get involved here. Really, the sails are acting like a wing that's going vertical. Okay, so being an aerodynamicist, I love this stuff. But you see on the lower left, that ship has got the sail to the right side of the hull. Okay, and then when it goes up to that first corner where it tacks, it's got the sails to the left side of the hull. Okay, so you've got to change the sails. And on Cook's ship, that would mean you've got to change the sails. You control those with ropes. So next chart. In maneuvering in these icebergs or ice fields, you need a captain that really knows his ship and sails, and Cook certainly did that. You need a crew that responds quickly, just like an America's Cup crew. And it's not a democracy out there, not on the America's Cup ships or on Cook's ship. It's sailing by captain's orders. So democracy doesn't work well on a ship. Next chart. Now, this is a picture in the upper left of a replica of the Endeavour that was made by the Australians. This is their 100-year anniversary of when they considered the founding of Australia. And what it shows, the Endeavour to me looks like it's on attack, going to the right. It's going to turn left if it wants to go perpendicular into the picture as shown here. And you see the different sails there. Okay, so you're going to have to put the sails to their optimum position. And how you control those sails is with ropes from down on the deck. Okay, and you're going, and also the number of sails. You got people that climb up these masts, climb out the yard arms, will either pull up or lower down the sails. And you can imagine doing this in freezing weather with 50-mile-an-hour gale winds. I mean, these guys were absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. But here we're looking at a ship that I think is tacking to the right at this point in time. Now, let's say they were confronted with ice field or an iceberg, and it's easy to sail with, they're sailing into the wind here, but they want to get out of here. They want to turn around and come out of the picture. So they want to turn the ship all the way around. So I'll try to describe this, and I hope you can understand it from a mechanical engineering point of view. What you do is you have different forces acting around the center of gravity. So let's say that center mast is the center of gravity of the ship. Now the sails in front of that are a force that's pulling the ship to the left, okay, in the picture. Also is the smaller sail mast in the rear, the third mast back. If you want to turn that ship around, you've got to pull those sails of the third mast around so that it's pulling you to the right. So it would pull it around. It's now like maybe 30 degrees to the left. You want to pull it around 30 degrees to the right. So the the third mast, the one that's closest to the flag, is going to give you a force to the right. The mast to the front is give you a force to the left. You're probably going to luff the sails in the center, which means just let them not have any force behind them by letting the ropes out. And your ship will turn around pretty fast in these winds of 20, 30 miles an hour. But you got to really know what you're doing. Now, the picture at the lower right, not the best picture, but the idea, this is the Endeavour in Sydney Harbor. The idea is to show you how many ropes are involved here. So the ropes control all of the sails. And so you've really got to be able to say, hey, I want to turn the ship around. And that gets translated into a lot of commands to pull on this sail one way and to pull on another sail a different way using all these ropes. If you ever are in Sydney Harbor and you want to see the replica of the Endeavour, if you come in, you're sailing in and you see the Symphony Hall, the Opera Hall, which is the landmark. There's the first harbor there. And then you go beyond the bridge. The bridge is right beyond that first quay, and you go into the second harbor. That's on the southern side. That's where the Maritime Museum is, and that's where the replica of the Endeavour is, if they're not out sailing it. So the first time I got there, I was able to go all over the Endeavour replica, and the second time, it was out at sea, so I just missed it. So it's a hit or miss on that. Okay, next chart. Third year. So he's going to come back. He's gone further south. He's lost a bit of his sail on the top gallant and the center mast, and he is back to Queen Charlotte Sound, back to Tahiti, and he's going to complete his circumnavigation of Antarctica. But the ship is beat up. He's beat up. His crew is beat up, and he's just not going to go as far south. Next chart. So that's it. Everything, the ship, the sails, the crew, really beat up. This is 2 years of tough sailing and really high winds, tough sea conditions, very cold. And he's just, even the sails, the three masts, with the wind, the force of the wind on there, will start having an effect on the structure of the ship. And the ship, the planks of the ship are on the side. They're planks that are right next to each other. And the force of the sail will actually put a little force on them, which will make them start to separate just a little bit. And so therefore you'll get leaks. You're constantly bailing out the ship with bilge water. But after 3 years, this is the third year of this, the leaks get a little worse. So he can't take the risks that he did the first 2 years. He's just not able to go that far south. You just need a really good ship, really good crew, everything top notch to do that. So he's going to sail, sweep out as much of the South Atlantic this time, and he's going to sweep out a bit of the South Pacific again, but again between 50 and 60 degrees, not south of 60 degrees. If he had gone south of 60 degrees like he had done the previous 2 years, he would have hit the Antarctic Peninsula. But he's going to go closer to Cape Horn, and he's going to start sweeping out the South Atlantic, and he's going to bump into South Georgia Island. That's an island that was previously noted in 1675, but nobody really got the accurate latitude and longitude. So he's going to really discover, map this, and he's going to discover islands to the south of that. Next chart. So what he's going to do, he's going to start, again, I am starting at Tahiti, but really he starts from Queen Charlotte Sound. He goes down to, following the purple line, down to Cape Horn, down to the tip of South America. We'll bump into South Georgia, then he'll go across the South Atlantic and come up vertically to Cape of Good Hope. Next chart. So more or less like the light blue line to the left of this picture, he's going to go across from Queen Charlotte Sound. He's going to sweep south, but not as far south as he did the prior 2 years. If he had gone down below 60 degrees, like he did the prior 2 years, you see that Antarctic Peninsula pointing out towards Cape Horn, he would have bumped into it. The tip of that is 63 degrees south latitude. And above that are the South Shetland Islands at about 61 degrees. So he would have discovered these islands, South Shetland, and really on a good day, maybe sailing a little south of those islands, he would have seen the Antarctic Peninsula and followed up on that. And during the summer, not a problem with ice down there. Okay, not a problem with ice, although it was a colder winter than what we've had heretofore. So what he is actually going to do is he's going to go south of Cape Horn. He's going to sweep south in the South Atlantic. He's going to bump into South Georgia. He's going to map where that is, latitude and longitude, and he's going to do one of his great maps like Newfoundland. This is a island that is smaller than Newfoundland. He's going to map the total coast, and then he's going to sail to the east, and he's going to discover another island chain further south than that. He's going to discover the furthest south land, which will be at 59 degrees south. Next chart. So this is South Georgia. Now this is really, we're always looking at charts with north being at the top. This is with south being at the top. If you look at the right, it says 54 degrees on the right side of the thing, and then way up above it says 55 degrees. So he's really going to come in. He's going to come in. He's going to hit more like at about 55 degrees. He'll circumnavigate the island, mapping the entire island, and you can see the rocks that he's mapped, Clerk rocks. Clerk is going to be one of his captains on the third voyage. And then he's going to continue after he's done this. When he hits it, he thinks, oh, this is maybe one of the capes of the southern landmass. So he's going to go down the island, and as he goes further south on the island, he's going to realize that it's an island, not a cape. And so the last thing he's going to name the last cape is going to be Cape Disappointment. You might be able to read that there. Disappointment because it's not the southern landmass that he was looking for. But he's going to continue the picture to the upper left of this diagram, and he's going to continue further south. Next chart. So what he's going to do is going to go over there where it says South Georgia, and he's coming out there. He's then going to continue to sweep the South Atlantic between 50 and 60 degrees. He's not going further south than 60. But as he goes to the east, he'll bump into another island chain. And so he names these the South Sandwich Islands. This is for Lord Sandwich, who's one of his mentors and sponsors in London. And he'll go down that island chain very methodically, noting where all those islands are, and going down to the very southern island, which is he'll name Southern Thule Island. Okay, that'll be at 59.4 degrees south. That'll be a new record for what mankind knows as the furthest south landmass. Next chart. So what this is, if you look at all the tectonic plates and everything, you go from Cape Horn over to South Georgia. You can see South Georgia just barely written there. And then the South Sandwich Islands out there. And then the land comes back through the South Orkneys, where it says 59.4 degrees south. If you just look up above that file, that's South Orkney land. And then you come further over to South Shetland Islands. Those are about 61 degrees south, and the very tip of the Antarctic Peninsula is 60 degrees south, 63 degrees south. So had he swept out this area as he did the previous 2 years at the below 60 degrees, he would have bumped into the Antarctic Peninsula. Okay, just unfortunate that that was the third year. Everything's built up, beaten up, and so he couldn't risk the ship going further south. And there you see Drake Passage. I think I called it Drake Strait, Drake Passage. Next chart. So again, there's Cape Horn on the left, Antarctica on the right, and he's going to go through, he's going to hit South Georgia, and then he's going to continue on to the latitude underneath Cape Town, South Africa, and head up north finally. So the greenish line that wiggles around is an idea, representation. Oh, I'm sorry, that is, yeah, the green is Cook, and the purple one is Bellinghausen. So Bellinghausen is about 50 years later. This is a Baltic German captaining the Russian expedition. I think it's about the only Russian expedition to Antarctica. It's pretty good. 50 years he went around and did the second circumnavigation of Antarctica. So this will be 50 years after Cook. So the green is Cook. It's not an accurate representation because really the green should be closer to Antarctica than what's shown there. But you get the idea. This is circumnavigation. Next chart. So what's Cook's Antarctic legacy? Number one is he was really the very first person to deliberately explore the Antarctic region. He did not achieve one of the goals, which is to find whatever landmass is in the Antarctic region. He was thwarted by ice, 75 miles of ice off the shore where he went in Antarctica. And then the last year, unfortunately, with the beat up ship, just didn't sail as far south as he did the previous years. Otherwise, he would have hit the Antarctic Peninsula. But he showed that people could sail south if they were courageous enough and skillful enough. Next chart. So Cook is going to go 71 degrees south. It's going to be another 50 years before another great mariner, Weddell, also Royal Navy, sails 74 degrees south. Okay, and that'll be in the Weddell Sea. So there's two seas. There's Ross, well, there's Weddell Sea and there's the Ross Ice Shelf. It'll be 70 years, and Ross will essentially go as far south as you can sail in the water. That's about 77 and 78 degrees. That is down to what is the Ross Ice Shelf. That's the opposite side from the Weddell Ice Shelf. And that's where the expeditions on land, or really on ice, will start to go to the South Pole. So that'll be Scott, that'll be Shackleton, that'll be Amundsen. That'll be all starting from the Ross Ice Shelf. So they can only get 77 degrees south. This is just another 6 degrees further south than what Cook sailed. Just a tremendous statement of what Cook's ability was. Next chart. So I just want to go all the way down to the very bottom here. 1911 is when Amundsen and Scott will reach the South Pole. But if we look up at the top, Cook in 1773, probably 1774, reaches 71.2 degrees south. The first landing on Antarctic Peninsula, you got different claims. There's 3 different claims that year. And I'm just going to put up one of them just because it happens to be the American one. And this is a sealer, not an explorer. So he's looking for seals. He was working in the South Shetland Islands. This is Palmer, and he will sail down to Antarctic Peninsula, but he's looking for seals. Okay, but this is the first landing on the Antarctic Peninsula. Now, in 1899, Borchgrevink, who's really Norwegian but living in Australia and part of an Australian mission to Antarctica, and the Australians have done quite a bit of exploration in Antarctica, will land at Cape Adar. That is where pretty much where Cook was the first year. And the Australians will land there at 71 degrees south because there's no ice that year. Okay, from the shore out, they're able to get right directly on the shore. It's more like that picture I showed you of what the ice was like in 2016. Okay, but that was not what Cook was facing. He was facing 75 miles of ice. So they're able to land just because the ice is receded in 1899. They're able to land directly on the land. Tough landing, by the way. And then when Ross has discovered the Ross Ice Shelf, there's an island there, and Cook will use that, or Scott will use that as his base. He will go down in the very first year going down that Ross Ice Shelf, he'll get to 82 degrees south. 7 years later, Shackleton will use pretty much the same base, and he will go to 88 degrees south. That's the first time that Cook made a 15-degree improvement in further south. This is the first time that anybody will make a 15-degree improvement over Cook. That'll be 1909, so it's nearly 150 years later. And of course, in 1911, Amundsen and Scott will reach the South Pole. Next chart. So just to sort of, put the information in a little different format, Vasco da Gama, 34 degrees south. Drake will take it more than 15 degrees south of that to 56 degrees. And of course, Magellan before that at 54 degrees. And then from Drake, it'll be Cook deliberately going south for the first time, 15 degrees. And then another 15 degrees south will be Shackleton, almost reaching the South Pole in 1908, 1909. Next chart. So Captain Cook, just one of the truly great explorers. He had 3 tremendous voyages of exploration in the Pacific. He is the one that really started Antarctic exploration. And it really wouldn't start going for another 50 years after Cook. And then really like the first step on land would be 1820, another, what is that? Another 50 years before somebody stepped on Antarctica. So just somebody's got to start the way. Somebody's got to be first on the moon. Somebody's got to be first to sail down to in the Antarctic seas and show that it could be done. And that was Captain Cook. So I thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy this week on Antarctica. Thank you.